Welcome to the Small Fleet and Owner Operator Summit. I'm Thomas Watson here, and we're having a fireside chat with the folks at the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association. There's a lot of stuff going on this year, especially if you're thinking about what's impacting small fleets and owner operators. And we thought, let's talk to the folks who are on the ground and most in the know about what we should be paying attention to. So we're super excited to be catching up again with Todd Spencer. He's the president of OOIDA. And Todd, it's an absolute pleasure to get to catch up with you again.
Hey, glad to be part of your event.
And there's a lot of things going on, so let's dive right in. When you're looking at, especially in OOIDA and all the new administration, all the regulatory stuff, there's a few key issues that are coming top of mind. And so give us a little bit of a breakthrough. One of the big ones has been lately parking shortage. There's been some legislation. There's been quite a bit of media coverage. Tell us a little about how OOIDA is viewing that. And is that something that we need to put on our roadmaps as we're working through this new administration and new FMCSA and DOT?
Well, I'd like to think that that's been on your roadmap for a long time because it's certainly been top of mind to us at OOIDA for about a quarter of a century right now, because this is not a new problem at all. We've had a shortage of places for trucks to park for a long time. It's getting worse as the number of trucks on the road has grown. And it's something that, that lawmakers should be able to get their arms around fairly easily. But a lot of things come up in the process that influence priorities. And unfortunately, the folks behind the wheel haven't been the priority that they should have been. And they need to be with lawmakers because this is very much a safety issues. And when I talk about parking and I talk about rest areas, rest areas are really, really important to truckers, but they're important to motorists too. And, we are a mobile society and we get places primarily by automobile. And rest areas are key they're key for people feeling comfortable, stopping to take breaks, relieving themselves. It's very much a highway safety issue, but it's certainly a highway safety issue for truckers too, but also it's a key element of the efficiency in our supply chain. And, in recent years, that's never been more important. The evidence has never been more glaring, and we need to address it, and lawmakers have had the tools to do it. It's just not quite been the priority with them that it needs to be. And, we believe we worked really, really hard to get it remedied in the last highway bill. When push came to shove, it was a much higher priority in the House than it was in the Senate. And the money that we wanted for parking didn't end up in that bill. But we've got another highway bill that's actually being created right now. It needs to be passed next year. And we certainly hope we can convince when I say we, I'm talking about OOIDA, but I'm also talking about everyone out there that's in this industry, because it is the men and the women behind the wheel that we need to accommodate, and they deserve it.
And when we're looking at thinking about getting it passed, you mentioned, the Congress as well as the Senate is one of the big challenges. I'm assuming is we have basically two different spending bills. Each side works on it. Then they have to haggle together over what they want to keep after it passes. Is there something where maybe the Senate looks a little different at things than the Congress in terms of purse strings, or is it really making the relationships the right subcommittee people and then saying, hey, look, this is super important. We need to get this attached to something as part of a larger, like a spending budget or like an omnibus or something?
Well, generally, whether it's House or Senate, leadership has leadership, and majority leadership ultimately will be the determining factor whether something gets in or not. In the previous highway bill, we were successful in getting $1 billion earmarked for parking in the highway bill, but it didn't survive in the Senate, which is really, really, really unfortunate. And which basically means we've got to find the ways to make this a greater priority with lawmakers in the Senate. Because, this isn't a partisan deal. This is a safety deal, and lawmakers need to recognize it for what it is. And again, I talk about safety, but again, our supply chain has to function. and it can't function the way it needs to if drivers are struggling regularly every night just to find some place to stop and rest.
There were some recent studies, I think they're like one out of how much the extent of the parking. It was like drivers spend an average of an hour during their trips each day trying to find parking, whether it's through circling lots. It's very underfunded. If we're looking at getting that parking, would OOIDA and other trucking advocacy focus on having more rest stops along the route? Or is this something where when we're trying to come up with a strategy, maybe I need some more flat top parking in key locations? Is there something that when you're looking at a package or you want to get on the legislation, there's something that maybe even they prefer in terms of the type of parking we would like to see?
Well, I think drivers would tell you pretty much across the board, their preferred places to park are truck stops. The dilemma there is that certainly parking is expensive. Truck stops are expensive. In places where you have large congregations of trucks, you also have, a premium costs that go along with real estate, which sort of flies in the face of trying to economically create in things for truckers like parking, like restaurants. It's a real challenge there. So, generally, again, truckers prefer truck stops, and, the more the better, and the better accommodations. Hey, there's a whole bunch of folks would like to see a return to sit down restaurants.
I would definitely approve that as well. If you see what they offer, some of the CPG and the prepackaged foods, I would love to see something real. Hopefully we can get that. Let's switch gears real quick as well. One of the big topics is freight fraud. There's been talks about the FMCSA and broker transparency, the comment periods, as well as potential legislation. Tell us a little bit about what OOIDA's thoughts are, especially in regards to freight fraud.
Well, there's always been crooks and bad guys, and they're innovative, and it's like everything that's sort of related to cybercrime. You can fail all kinds of times, but if now and then you're successful, it's pretty lucrative. And this is an issue that what we run up against is that the people that you would think would have some direct interest in compliance with the law and theft and things like that, there's not as much communications there, not enough communication there as there needs to be. There needs to be more of a holistic approach when it comes to all aspects of law enforcement on dealing with that. But the key thing that would probably make more difference in the world right now, the biggest thing, would be for FMCSA to update and improve its systems so its systems would not allow bad operators, crooked operators, to basically register like they are good guys on FMCSA websites. And there's been a chronic need for that, and it's something that's easy to exploit. And again, FMCSA they certainly don't have the tools right now, but they need to find them and implement them so bad guys aren't able to register to start with. And they need to secure their systems. They recognize that identities and things like that are stolen. Let's come up with some ways to stop that stuff. And there is legislation that is in the works that could move us in that direction. And for us, that's certainly the priority.
Is that also kind of pairs into not only you can have your identity stolen, but there's a whole third-party market for selling your MC number. So if I had a 20-year aged MC, someone else can buy that. And maybe the FMCSA in the database is, folks, if you're not careful, you can literally spoof and say, I'm an older, more established carrier than I currently am.
When that transaction takes place, there needs to be follow-up to make certain that the people that are involved in that transaction are actually legitimate. They're legitimate players. They're legitimate players on this side of the ocean. And of course, the word for the wise for truckers too is that you've got to know who you're doing business with, and don't think everybody out there is going to treat you well. You want to identify those folks that do and stick with them. We're we're in a service industry, and trucking is hard enough without having to worry whether or not you're going to get paid when you take the load. So you identify that issue up front.
And looking at things like the potential for fraud, this one being broker transparency. Sometimes if you get a rate and you feel like you're getting, I'm getting gypped, I could have got $200 more. Is that something that OOIDA is paying close attention to? Or do you think that the freight fraud, broker transparency, kind of the broker transparency thing is going to go anywhere this year? Or maybe it's going to get stalled out? Are there any thoughts on that?
Well, we're very much in support of the provisions that actually require transparency. I mean, we're not talking about something new here. We're talking about something that's actually on the books for over 40 years. It's just certainly most brokers have simply not chosen to comply with it. Now, what we're talking about here isn't probably there are a lot of truckers that have this misperception that this is going to be a tool for you to use to negotiate the load that you're on right now. And that's not how it works. The transparency provision takes place after the terms have already been agreed to and you've moved the load. Now, when you look through that, if you feel like you were taken advantage of, you were exploited, well, then what I'm sure should happen is that I don't think I'm going to do business with this guy anymore. I'm going to find somebody else that I want to partner with that places a better value on the good service I provide and that I might provide for them down the road. So we see that's where this goes. And the other thing is, it isn't just about rates. Where the lack of transparency becomes so frustrating is when something unexpected happens, some kind of an incident, some kind of a claim, without accurate information to who the players are, you can't reasonably, practically, and fairly resolve the issues. And certainly that needs to be that. The transparency has never been more important there because, again, we're in the service business. We want to treat everybody fairly, resolve things fairly, and transparency will help.
I can imagine many times being on both sides of the seat, dispatching or being a broker, where things like detention and accessorials may not get paid out to you correctly. And then the broker gets the extra $50 because, well, it got submitted later, but then the driver never followed up. So even with the transparency aspect, not only am I getting a fair rate, but you also want to double check your partners, because what if they're pocketing your 50, 100, $150 and it turns out that they're not being a good faith player? Is that one of the also things that maybe folks hadn't thought about?
Oh, well, sure, absolutely. And again, that in itself probably depending on how your agreement is with that for taking that load. There may be no immediate remedy there, but again, it's a tool to know who you want to work with. If this guy's skinning me, I'm going to find somebody else.
That's a challenge, especially in this line of work. You never know. It takes a long time to build that trust. And one of the things, speaking of trust as well, switching around, taxes, tolls, and fees. Hopefully I trust that I'm not getting taxed, tolled, or feed too much, but lately toll roads have been exploding, and especially solutions to deal with it. Talk to us a little bit about that. I know with taxes and fees, I've heard of things like trying to remove the extra tax stamp paid on tractors that was from like World War I, or extra fees in terms of like registration. What are some of the things that maybe folks haven't really thought about in terms of how that's impacting drivers?
Well, the principal way that this country built our interstate and national dedicated highway system was through federal fuel taxes. And those fuel taxes were collected on the sales of diesel fuel, and they were collected in DC and distributed back to the various states based on usage and things like that, and other formulas. But this is what allowed the building, and they were dedicated for highways. Now, somewhere along the line, this goes back probably 20 years or more ago now, they started earmarking a portion of those federal fuel taxes for transit and things like that. But at any rate, the fuel tax at one time was as low as 3 cents, and it's gradually moved higher. Right now, the current tax on diesel fuel is 24.4 cents per gallon. And it's been that way since the 1990s. It's not gone up any. And of course, the cost of everything, construction, concrete, all this stuff, it's all gone up much. But that fuel tax has never gone up. Fuel tax money go into the Highway Trust Fund. These are dedicated funds just for highways. They're sort of supposedly walled off. Well, since about 2008, the Highway Trust Fund has been falling short of collecting the amount of money needed for roads and bridges and other things. And of course, through these years, this is 2025. So the amount of the shortage has been made up by just funds out of the general treasury. Lawmakers have been aware of this for a long time, but the last thing that, for, I don't know, at least more than the last decade, the last thing you'd ever want to say if you're an aspiring elected official wanting to get in office or stay in office is, I think we need to increase taxes. So they don't. They kick the ball down the road. Well, they're not going to be able to kick the ball down the road much more. And recent things that have taken place in D.C. have pretty much opened the doors once again to states to be creative about how they collect money for roads and bridges. That means sometimes some idiotic fees. It's sometimes some of the stuff like what Rhode Island was doing, collecting tolls from trucks only. We see more of that stuff moving forward. And then, of course, it's going to be, I guess, kind of interesting to see how our elected officials play this, because we've had lawmakers that have known for a long time that a user fee should apply to all users. And more we have vehicles on the road that don't burn much fuel or don't burn any at all, gasoline or diesel. So, and these users should pay into the system as well. So they kick around this notion of a vehicle miles traveled tax. And of course, it's kind of interesting. We know these lawmakers want to do this. They just don't want people to recognize what they're doing because they figure it won't be met all that well with their constituents when you start talking about, we want to collect fees for you for the amount of travel that you do. And how you do that, and whether it's a privacy issue or things like that, well, we're serious. We're very much concerned about privacy. However, with technology, truckers end up giving away more and more of that all the time. Now, we want to always push back where it makes sense to do that. But, again, lawmakers are going to be looking at many of these systems over the next few years because they want more money for roads and bridges and other things. So, and certainly highway users are going to be a prime source for that. Now, we've got to be on guard because we don't want trucks to be singled out for more than their fair share. And it's an easy lift for a lawmaker to say, well, we've got this perfect fee, we've got this perfect tax. It's going to be paid by other people.
And we got a little bit of time left here before we finish up. The EPA, we could probably spend a whole hour and a half talking about phase 3 carbon stuff. Is there anything in particular OOIDA feels like folks should be paying attention to? Are we going to see maybe a rollback, or what are some of the early thoughts as we're getting in this new administration?
Well, I think we're clearly going to be looking at a rollback, certainly of some of the more egregious things. But, I'd rather, for me, I think it's more, what should be is it's more like a reset. Everybody should be interested in clean air and making our environment as clean and positive as it can be, and obviously being efficient with fuel. Having said that, where in our view, EPA and CARB kind of got off the rails is that they're proposing things that you can't really meet. You can't really accommodate. And we're kind of seeing this example now when it comes to EVs. Now, EVs seems to me like that could accommodate cars very well in lots and lots of instances if you want one. But what we lack is the grid, the infrastructure for automobiles. Well, you know, we lack the grid, the infrastructure for our country's electricity needs going forward for everything. And so rather than mandating a push to electric vehicles when there's not a system there that can accommodate them, let's do the grid first, and then if these things make sense, people will gravitate to them. I mean, that's how we look at this stuff. And we certainly want to have as many regulators and lawmakers on the same sheet of music as we are on this one. It makes sense.
Completely. They're glossing over the hard part by taking the easy way out. So maybe one of the themes is get the hard work done first, especially in terms of infrastructure and solving the fuel crisis that we're dealing with through tolls and other stuff. It's a lot of great information. Todd, I feel like we could go on for a whole hour, but unfortunately we are low on time. If folks want to learn more about OOIDA and see what y'all are working on, catch information, what's the best way to find out?
Hey, our website is ooida.com, and we're going to be available on almost all social media. We have real people that answer the phone here. Certainly every trucker out there ought to be a member of the organization. Our membership fee is as economical as it can possibly be, and we've been advocating on behalf of truckers for over half a century now. And of course, I'd like to think we could get problems all solved, but there will always be new ones, and there'll always be a need for the views of real truckers, the men and women behind the wheel, to be certainly brought front and center in front of policymakers if we want policies and laws that actually make sense. Because if you're going to have compliance with anything, you've got to have support. You've got to have buy-in behind from the people behind the wheel. And, hey, we want to get there.
We appreciate you taking some time helping get drivers' voices heard as well. That's going to be a wrap for this fireside chat. But don't worry, folks, we have a lot more chats coming up. Stay tuned.